We will start with reciting the Refuge and Bodhichitta prayer in Tibetan. O Sanje Chedan Sogi Chonam La Chancho Bardo Dane Chapsum Je Dagi Jin Sogi Besanam Je Drola Penjir Sanje Drobar Sho Sangye Chedan Sogi Chonam La Chancho Bardo Dane Chapsum Je Dagi Jin Sogi Besanam Je Drola Penjir Sanje Drobar Sho Sangye Chedan Sogi Chonam La Chancho Bardo Dane Chapsum Je Dagi Jin Sogi Besanam Je Drola Penjir Sanje Drobar Sho Sanjen Tamje Dewa Tan Dewe Judan Demra Juji Donga Tan Donga Judan Jujin Dewa Tamba Tam Mindrawa Juji Nidin Chata Nidan Ravi Tanyon Shambola Nebra Jurji. The Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Guru. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that Dharma become the path. Bless us that the path dispel confusion. Bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And so now today, as we begin our second day of the teachings on Abhidharma, as we begin the second day of teachings, the first thing we need to do is we need to recollect a good motivation, remind ourselves to have a good motivation as we listen to the Dharma. And so for that reason, please think to yourself that we are listening to the Dharma not only to bring ourselves some sort of satisfaction or pleasure in this lifetime, but also the ability to transcend suffering completely ourselves, and to once we have figured out how to transcend suffering ourselves, then we can benefit other sentient beings, and so then take it as a way to take these teachings as a way to increase our bodhicitta, our motivation of wishing to bring all sentient beings to the state of true freedom from happiness, the state of Buddhahood. And so listening with that motivation, today we're going to continue where we left off yesterday. So yesterday we spoke about speaking about the third chapter of the Treasury of Abhidharma according to the commentary by the Ninth Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje. The commentary is entitled Youthful Play. So in this third chapter there are two main parts. And these two main parts are the world of sentient beings and the outer world environment, the physical world, that is. So the world of sentient beings has 5 parts, and the first of the 5 parts is the classifications of wanderers who are born, the nature of interdependence, which is the manner of birth. The third is conditions for abiding after birth. The fourth, the minds of staying and dying. And the fifth is categorizing beings in the 3 groups. So these are the 5 different subsections of the first major portion of the chapter. And the first of these, the classifications of the wanderer, has 3 topics: classifying wanderers in 3 realms, classifying wanderers in 5, and classifying them in the 4 modes of birth. And so we're still talking about the first, the classification in the 3 realms. So this is on page 216 of the text. Of course, most of you are missing pages 1 to 214, but it's the page 216 here. And one thing to before we actually get into this, one thing to talk about is how to actually study. It's a little bit different here because we're doing with just a few people live here, our studio audience, so to speak. And we also have a larger number of people who are listening online or watching online. So the question is, how can you study doing this in a way to make it worthwhile for you? So there are two texts that are that we have. We have the root text in one PDF file. We have the commentary in another file. If you have the book, you have them both all in one book. When you have the root text file, the way to use that, we're not going to be going through that in the class particularly, because we're going to be going through the commentary. Now, the verses of the root are laid out in the commentary. So, in a sense, you might think, oh, why do I need this root text? It's all in the commentary. The reason why we need the root text is because you have to kind of do things to remind you of it. And actually, the way the root text is written, as I mentioned yesterday, it's like a really great mnemonic device to remember what's going on. The first time you read the root text, it will not make much sense to you. The second time, it will not make much sense. But as we go through more and more, then words are going to pop out, and it's going to be get easier and easier to remember things and put things together. So you should actually just spend some time each day reciting the text of the chapter. One way you can do it is you can recite the third chapter one day and the fourth chapter the next day. Go back and forth between the two. So take the time independent of the time in the class. And if you do this every day, then as we get to the material in the class, first of all, then the words are going to be familiar to you. You'll say, oh, that's what that word is. And you'll be able to recognize and attach the meaning to the word in the root text better, right? So it'll make more sense to you when you actually get to it in the commentary. And then the other way is that sometimes these words are going to just come back to you. Like one of the lines that sticks in my mind most of all is a line from later in the third chapter. It reads, unpleasant sound 8 equals square. Now this is totally ungrammatical. And, there's like unpleasant sound 8 equals square, a noun or a name, and then 4 adjectives. It's like, what is this? It doesn't mean anything at first. But as you learn, you get to that section of the text, it tells you the northern continent of unpleasant sound is 8. That's the 8,000 leagues in perimeter. They're equal in size. That means each one is 8 divided, that's 2,000 leagues, and they're square because they're all equal. And then it's like really easy. So you just remember the shape and the size of the northern continent of unpleasant sound really easily, just because it's like easy. Unpleasant sound 8 equals square. Even though it means nothing on its own. Any editor worth their salt would look at this and say, this is an ungrammatical sentence, and you'd have to say, absolutely yes, it is ungrammatical. That's not the point. So that's why we work with the root and the commentary. Okay? That's why it's important to have a root, even if the root on its own seems a little bit cryptic. So then yesterday I think on the YouTube page the description had the link, but somehow the link got mucked up for the root text. So if you had trouble downloading the root text yesterday, try again today. We've reposted the link and it should work better today. So when we're talking about the 3 realms, before we really we have to understand what each of the realms is, because it's not given in much detail in the text. So we have these 3 realms, and what are the 3 realms? They're the desire realm as first, then we have form realm and formless realm. So these are 3 different realms that we have: desire, form, and formless. So yesterday we spoke about the desire realm. Basically, the desire realm is the realm that we're in right now. Now, we don't see the entire desire realm. We do not see the realms of the gods. We do not see the realms of the hungry ghosts or the realms of the hells. Although, if we were actually able to get there, we would be able to see them according to the sutras. So they're not that different, but still, it's just hard for us to get to the hells and to the realms of the hungry ghosts and so forth. So we can't actually see them. We can see the realms of animals. Sometimes we might think to ourselves that, well, we don't know where it is. And when you look at the traditional descriptions of the world realms, they don't match our current ideas of the universe. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there is no hell. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's no hungry ghosts. It means that it's just not the way it was, physically the way it was explained in our perception. So that's a point that we'll be coming back to later when we get to the actual description of the universe. But at any rate, we have the five different types of wanderers, right? And we have the three realms. And then the desire realm, we have which types of wanderers? We have the hells, so they're the hell beings. They're the hungry ghosts. They're the animals. They're the humans. And then remember here, we're not talking about the demigods. You might be often used to thinking about demigods. They're included either in gods or in hungry ghosts. So then we skip to the gods. And with the gods, then we have a portion. We have several of the god realms, several of the levels of the god realms are included in the desire realm, and others are included in the form and formless. So, but basically when we're talking about the form realm, or the desire realm, what we're talking about are beings who are characterized by kind of a desire for food and sexual pleasure are the primarily types of desire. So those are the things that distinguish the beings in the desire realm. That's why it's called the desire realm. So when we're in the desire realm, what happens is that sometimes, particularly among humans, it's possible, you realize that the desire realm, even though when you're in a place like a human realm, there are temporary pleasures, as we have learned all too clearly from the current pandemic, all these pleasures, everything that people have enjoyed about their lives, restaurants, sporting events, and hanging out, all this stuff is just now you can't do it. That's not everything people enjoy about their lives, but a large part of the way people enjoy themselves is just no longer available to you. You realize that actually these pleasures are temporary. They're not good. So what do? Then you hear about meditation. So you start to meditate, and this is not just something in the current situation. It also has been happening for thousands of years. And so in India, they realized that if someone developed very strong, stable meditation and freed themselves of desire for the pleasures of this realm, then they would be able to achieve what is called dhyana meditation. So that's spelled D-H-Y-A-N-A. This is the Sanskrit word, the Pali word is jhana. They spell it with a J, J-H-A-N-A. Or maybe it's two J's, I don't remember exactly. And then dhyana in Sanskrit. And so basically what this means is that through the power of meditation, a person, a human, overcomes the attachment to this particular desire realm that we are in. And because they achieve that level, then they gain a very stable meditation. And in fact, once they gain that, they realize that there are different levels of this meditation. So in the dhyana meditation, there's the first dhyana meditation, but even that, it's a very strong meditation. It has great powers of analysis and consideration, but then the person who's meditating on that realizes that that is also kind of coarse, and that there's a subtler level, and then they give up their attachment to that first level of dhyana through their meditation. They go through a particular specific series of meditations, and then they achieve the second dhyana. And then in that second dhyana there is joy. There's no consideration and attachment, but there's joy and so forth and other qualities there. But they realize that their joy there is a mental pleasure, and it's not very stable, and so they think there's a finer level than this, and so then they meditate and achieve the third dhyana. And then on the third dhyana, compared to the second level, it's a very pure meditation, but it's not completely pure. And so then the meditator can meditate on the preparations for the fourth jhana, eliminate all their attachment to the third jhana, achieve the fourth jhana. So these are the four levels of dhyana. Now, the reason why these are important at this point, you can do all these as a human if you have the instructions. You can do all of these as a human. And the result of doing these is if you achieve the first jhana in this lifetime, then in your next lifetime, as a result of that karma, you'll be reborn in the first level of form. So you've got the meditation that we do here, and then as a result of that meditation, you're born in the level of form. So for that reason, because there are 4 dhyana meditations, there are 4 basic levels of the form realm. Does that make sense? You've got 4 meditations that are like the causes, and the results are the 4 levels of the form realm. So you meditate here, you get a very stable meditation. You have no desire for the desire realm, and then as a result of that, you're born in the form realm in your next lifetime. Now you can achieve these through either the worldly paths, that is like the non-Buddhist paths, or through the Buddhist path. So there are 2 different ways to achieve these meditations. So if you're doing it through worldly meditation, you're giving up the desire, but you're not uprooting all of the imprints that would cause rebirth here later. So you're temporarily suppressing your desire long enough for you to practice meditation in this lifetime, dhyana meditation in this lifetime, and to be reborn in the form realm in your next lifetime. Okay? So that's what the form realm is. Basically, this means people who no longer have given up the attachment to the desire realm, but are still attached to subtle form. So in the form realm, people have bodies of light and so forth. That's why it's called the form. So there's still attachment to form. Each of these levels has its own type of desire, its own level of afflictions. The higher the level, the subtler the afflictions, but there are still afflictions. So these are the 4 basic levels of the form realm, which correspond to the first dhyana. But within each of these 4 levels of form realm, 4 levels of dhyana, there are subdivisions because there are different levels of strength. And so this is where it says in the form realm, if we pick up in the book again on page 216 at the very last line, it gives the heading, it says, B, the form realm. So this is the second part of classifying the desire. When we're classifying in 3 realms, there's a classification: the desire realm, form realm, and formless realm. For the form realm, then there it has 2 points, and the first is the general classification. And the general classification is that above that, there are 17 higher abodes of the form realm. So above that, so that means above that desire realm. So then there are 17 realms of the 17 abodes of the form realm. So so as it says in the commentary, above that desire realm there are 17 higher abodes from Brahma's abode to below none, which are called the form realm because they are realms where one is detached from desire, but still attached to form. Okay, so that's the character, the particular desire that leads to rebirth there. So this is just saying that there are 17. The reason why there are 17 is because of gradations in the levels of meditation. So when you talk about the specific classification, there are 2 parts. That again has 2 parts, and the first is the classification of the first 3. So for the first 3 dhyanas, the classifications are similar. Each of the dhyanas has 3 levels. So the first, second, and third dhyanas have 3 levels each, which depends upon the level of your meditation. So if you're practicing your jhana meditation in this lifetime, and you just get to the first jhana, it's a big accomplishment on its own, but this is still lesser, right? The result of that kind of lesser meditation is that you'd be born in the first of the 3 levels, 3 abodes of the first jhana, which would be Brahma's abode. So Brahma is the god, right? So these are this is where you're born around Brahma. And then if your meditation is slightly better, you've got that medium sort of dhyana, first dhyana, then you're reborn in the level of Brahma's priests or Brahma's ministers, right? That's the second level. So you've got Brahmas abroad, Brahmas priests, and then the third level is if you have really good meditation, but still the first level of jhana, then you are reborn in the level of great Brahma itself. Or you could say as great Brahma himself. Right? So these are the three of the first jhana. There are these three. Brahma's abode, Brahma's ministers, and great Brahma. So these are three separate abodes, according to most schools. Some people say that the abode of great Brahma is actually just like a kind of elevated area within the level of Brahma's Brahma's ministers. But it's also more here. It's in this book. It's generally taught as a separate abode. That's where Brahma lives. And then with the second, so that's the first level of jhana. Then the second level of jhana, you have no attachment to the first level of jhana, and so then you are born in the three levels of the second jhana. Again, there's lesser, medium, and greater. So you've got the three levels of lesser light, immeasurable light, and radiant light. So these are the three: lesser light, radiant light, immeasurable light, and radiant light. And these are so called because of the qualities of the light of each being's body. One is just, they have light, and it's pretty amazing to have a body that's made out of light and that says that radiates light, but compared to the light that comes out of the beings in the second and third abodes of the second jhana, it's lesser, so it's called lesser. Just everything is related to each other. Then on the second one, the light is immeasurable. You can't say there's any bound to it. So it's immeasurable light. And the third is just really bright and radiant. So it's radiant light. Then on the level of the third jhana, when you have the meditation of the level of the third jhana, it can also be lesser, medium, or greater. And so for that reason, there are also three levels there. These three levels are called lesser virtue, immeasurable virtue, and full virtue. Now, it's interesting here. I translated these titles. Now, they're not in the actual text. They're listed in a footnote, but of course, the footnotes got left out of your books. I'm sorry about that. I need to put them up. One of you remind me sometime this afternoon to do that. I will put the footnotes on the web for tomorrow. At any rate, the Tibetan, the Sanskrit is actually, the word is kushala, which means virtue. That's the main meaning of it. But it also apparently, according to the Chim Abhidharma, the word kushala also can mean pleasure. So like virtue is the cause of pleasure. So actually the word kushala can apply to both the cause and to the result. So it seems. So you could think about translating this as lesser pleasure, immeasurable pleasure, and full pleasure. So these are the three levels of the third jhana. So those are the first three jhanas. They have three each. So you have three each. 3 times 3 is 9. So that gives us 9 of 17, right? Okay. So now we have come to the fourth jhana, but the fourth jhana has 8 levels. So on the fourth level there are 8, and to read it in the commentary. On the fourth jhana, there are the 3 levels of cloudless and so forth for ordinary individuals who have meditated on it. So what this means is that someone, let's say some yogi, doing the fourth jhana meditation, not Buddhist, they achieve this jhana meditation. They can either have, again, lesser, medium, or greater meditation. And so because of that, then when they're reborn, they can be reborn in the level of cloudless. It's cloudless because it's really clear and pure. Or they can, if they have medium fourth jhana, they can be born on the level of merit born because it's caused by merit. That's why it's called that. So cloudless, merit born. And then if they have the greater level of the worldly fourth jhana, then they're born in the level of great result. So these are the 3 impure realms of the fourth jhana: cloudless, merit born, and great result. Okay? But you can also achieve so those are the, excuse me, I should just follow the commentary. So those are the realms for the ordinary individuals who meditated on it through a worldly meditation, your average yogi. Then you have, nobles can have the 5 levels of the absorption of alternation, such as lesser, medium, and so forth absorptions of alternation. So when someone has meditated and they begin meditating, and they see the nature of the 4 noble truths. Once you have seen the nature of the 4 noble truths, then you can have undefiled meditation. So there are 2 types of meditation. There's worldly and there's undefiled, defiled and undefiled. So when you have the worldly dhyanas, then one thing that you can practice is what is called the absorption of alternation. So the absorption of alternation means that you start out meditating in the worldly meditation. Then you switch to the undefiled, that is the meditating on the true nature of the 4 noble truths with no afflictions, right? And then when you're done with that, you go back to the worldly meditation. So that's 1. So that's called the lesser alternation. And then you can have the medium alternation is going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back. So 5, right? So you've got defiled, undefiled, defiled, undefiled, defiled. So that's the medium. And then the greater was that's basically going back and forth twice. And then you can go back and forth 3 times. That is the greater. And then you have the what's the 5th one called? Oh, the extremely great is going back and forth 9 times, and then going back and forth 11 times would be the extremely very great. I don't remember exactly the term I used later on. This is discussed in the 8th chapter. At any rate, so these 5 different levels of alternating meditation, because there are 5 different levels of alternating meditation, and you don't have to take notes, this won't be on your final exam. Not on the, well, you should know it actually, just know. They're basically different levels of the alternating meditation. Now, for most individuals in doing the alternating meditation, because we're ordinary individuals, it takes time to go from one to another. So you're in the you're in the defiled for a period of time, then the undefiled for a period of time. So it takes some time to go back and forth. But the perfect Buddha is able to go back and forth in just a moment in each. So defiled, undefiled, defiled. It is even faster than we can say it. So each of so this is a distinction of the Buddha. So based upon the level of alternating meditation you have, you can be born in any of the levels of the pure realms. So these are what we talk about, the pure realms, the pure realms of the form. So these are the 5 realms: are not great, without pain, excellent appearance, great virtue, and below none. So below, and I should really go up this way because the below none is on the top. So not great, of course, is not great only in comparison to the other levels. Without pain, excellent appearance, and great wishes, and below none. So below none is also known in Sanskrit as akanishta. So this is the level of akanishta. And we say when I'm in the opening prayer. So if you translate akanishta into English, one way of translating it is below none. There's nothing above it. So it's below none. Okay, so that's the 4 levels of the form realm and the 17 realms. So you've got the 3 impure on each of the 4 levels, plus and so the 4 times 3 is 12, plus 5 pure, and that ends up 17, right? You got that? We add that to the 20 of the desire realm, now we're at 37 realms. Right, 37 levels. Okay. So that's the form realm. So after the form realm, we then have the formless realm. So again, the formless realm is similar to the form realm in that it's born out of meditation. But the difference is that the beings in the formless realm realize that even having the subtle concept of form, such as the beings in the form realm have, even that is not liberation, it is not freedom, it is still a little bit of, a little bit of discomfort there. It's not quite the same. I mean, it's a neutral feeling on the 4th, but it's still coarse compared to the formless meditations. And so there are the 4 formless meditations. And so these then lead to the 4 different formless realms. So that is what, so in this lifetime, you realize that in this lifetime you, as a human, you meditate on the dhyanas, you realize that the dhyanas aren't quite it, they're still kind of coarse compared to what you could do, and you meditate on the 4 formless meditations, you develop the absorption or meditation in this lifetime. The result of that absorption is that you are then reborn in the corresponding realm. Well, I shouldn't be directing it, so like, where is the corresponding realm? That's the problem. So the formless realm, there are 3 points. So the first thing about the formless realm is that you cannot classify it by abode. There's no classification by abode. You cannot distinguish it by place. As the root text says, the formless realm has no abodes. There's no place for the formless realm, because in order for there to be a place, you have to have something with form. If there's no form, there's no place, right? It's basically, your body has a place, your mind does not. So it's basically, that's what it's saying. In the formless realm, the 4 name aggregates of birth establish themselves in that very level on which the being died. So the 4 name aggregates, right? We have the 5 aggregates, right? We have form, feeling, conception, formation, and consciousness are the 5 aggregates that we assume are me. So in the formless realm, you have no form. You're left with the other 4. Feeling, conception, formation, and consciousness. And so these 4 aggregates don't go to some other realm. It's like wherever they were, that's where they stay. They just don't, there's no need to go anywhere. You're in the formless absorption. There's no location. So there is not a particular place. You cannot say above the, each of the levels of the form realm are one on top of the other, 17 realms going all the way up to below none, and there's no formless realm above that because there's just no location, right? That's what it's saying. And so these levels are but even though we say that there aren't any abodes, we still can classify it in 4 because of birth, as it says, classifying in 4 by birth. Because of birth, it has 4 types. So, to read the commentary on this, because of differences in birth, it has 4 different types. The sense base of infinite space, the sense base of infinite consciousness. Sense bases here means like, it's a way of saying like the Sanskrit word is ayatana. And it usually refers to the, to the inner sensory faculty and the external form. But it also can be used to refer to meditations, in particular the formless realms that in themselves work as like bases for consciousness, so the sense base, right? It provides a support for consciousness. So it's the sense base of infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, and neither conception nor non-conception. So these conceptions, they each have kind of descriptive name. The name more or less tells you how you get to that level. These absorptions are so called because of the way one trains to achieve them. First, from both the conception of form and the part of it that is perceived as disintegrated, one thinks space is infinite. So, first of all, you have when you're meditating and you're in the level of the form realm, you have the conception of there being form, the idea of form. You can perceive the forms on your own level. So if you're on the 4th dhyana, there are the forms of those. And so when you think to yourselves, these are actually still coarse, they're not true, they're not real, I want to overcome the desire for these forms, and I just think everything is space. You meditate that everything is space, and then because of that you achieve this level where there is infinite space, and so you've overcome your attachment to the form and the conception of form in general, in particular to the one that you perceive. So that is one thing. And then, So that's the first, infinite space. So from transcending the negation of the existence of anything perceived in mere space, there is a not-negation of it as a thing, and one thinks consciousness is infinite. So you think that when you're thinking it's just infinite space, there's negation thinking there's nothing. And then there's thinking it's not. There's a not negation saying it's not nothing. There's just consciousness. Consciousness is infinite. So that's the second of the four formless. So you train in that one. Then one thinks this mere awareness cannot be proven to be any particular essence. And then, and so that comes to think that actually even this awareness is nothing at all. So you think there's just nothingness. Even consciousness is nothing. So that's the level of nothingness. And then you think that even thinking that it is nothing is a thought, it's a conception. So thinking that conceptions are results and they're painful. But if you didn't have any conceptions, it would just be, the lack of conceptions total stupidity. So you'd just be in complete blank, nothing. And so you do not stop, so there's still a subtle, so one does not stop the subtle, unclear movement of conceptions. So you still have very subtle conceptions, but not any coarse conceptions. So it's a very, very fine level, and this is the very subtle level of consciousness. This is the highest level of worldly consciousness called neither conception nor non-conception. So this level is also called the peak of existence because it's in terms of, not in terms of physical, because obviously it has no physical, but in terms of the levels of subtlety, it's the highest or the subtlest of the levels. So during the actual absorption, one chains the results similar to those trainings, so the absorptions are therefore named after them. So those four thoughts, those are the trainings that you go through to achieve them. Once you achieve the absorption, you don't need to continue thinking space is infinite or consciousness is infinite or nothingness. Those are the meditations you do to train them. When you're in the absorption, then you just rest in that absorption. So when you develop those absorptions in this lifetime, you pass away in this lifetime, and then you are reborn because of the force of that karma. You're reborn in the corresponding level of the formless realm, which is not a separate location. But then there's a problem. And the problem is this: when we are in the form and the desire realms, then it's our body that supports our life. We've got the body that keeps us going. And you can say that we stay with this lifetime as long as this body continues functioning. But when you get to the when you get to the formless realms, there's no body. So what actually supports supports life and supports the consciousness at that time? Why is it that it continues? So that's what this next section talks about, how the continuum of mind is engaged. Their likeness and life force as well support the mind's continuum. So there, in the formless realm, there are two things. One is likeness, and the other is life force. And they support the mind's continuum. They're like the bases on which the mind rests. Okay, it's just as like right now, your mind is supported by your body. In the formless realm, it's supported by the likeness and the life force. So life force is what we talked about last year, one of the 22 faculties. For those of you who were present, we have the 5 faculties, so the sensory faculties, then we have the 4 of mind and so forth. Mind, life force, male and female, and so forth. So those are in the second chapter, but one of those is the life force faculty. And basically the life force is what maintains you in a certain likeness over the same time. So what a likeness means here, it basically means staying as the same type of being. What you can think of it as, it means that from the time you are born until the time you die, there's a continuum that maintains the same class. You don't start out, you don't get to a certain age as a human and then all of a sudden turn into an animal, except metaphorically. Or you don't go from being an animal into being, you don't transform from being an animal to being human or human to an animal. You don't transform from being a human being to being a hell being. Now, you might be able to go visit the animals. You can go visit the hell realms if you have an after-death, an out-of-body experience, as some people have done, or whatever. you can have those experiences, but you don't actually leave this human body until your final death, right? So that's that likeness. So even on the level of the formless realm, there's still that likeness that's keeping you within that same continuum of mind. That's likeness, life force, and likeness. Now we have to remember that this presentation is according to the Great Exposition School. This is not accepted by all Buddhist schools. Like the Sutra school says it's basically just the mind and mental factors, there's nothing else. But the Great Exposition posits that there's a separate life force faculty, and there's a separate likeness that we maintain through our lifetime. So here let's read the commentary. In desire and form, the continuum of mind is supported by the bodily form. But what supports it here, you ask? Here being the formless realm. There in the formless realm, likeness of the same status, that means staying in the same class the whole time, and life force as well support the mind's continuum. As well means that the continuum is continuum of mind, is also supported by karma, non-possession, attainment, birth, and so forth. So these are, the continuum of mind is not only supported by these, there are also other things, and this is what the word as well means. This is something you have to be very careful when you're translating something. You have to look at all the little words, and you have to say, is this explained? Because sometimes people throw in the word yang in Tibetan. They just put in an extra word yang here and there, and you think it's just to fill out the syllable, to fill out the line, so they have enough syllables in the line. But it's not necessarily that. It could have meaning, and so you always have to check the commentaries when you're translating to make sure that that little yang or that little ni when you're in Tibetan actually has meaning or not. If it doesn't have, if the commentaries don't give it meaning, you don't need to give it meaning. The continuum of mind is also supported by karma, non-possession, attainment, birth, and so forth. Non-possession, what that means is, this is again according to the Great Exposition School, when you have eliminated afflictions, there is a quality of not having them. That's what we call non-possession. It's what we call technically a non-concurrent formation. So there are different non-concurrent formations, 14 to talk about it. Those we covered last year. But basically what we're saying is that when you have given up the afflictions, when someone achieves the formless realm, they've given up all attachment to the levels of desire and the 4 levels of form, and so they have the non-possession of all of the afflictions, all of those attachments. That's what we're talking about here. Attainment means that they have attained, they may have attained, if they're noble beings who have seen the 4 noble truths, they've attained the path, attained certain qualities, and so forth. Birth, that means the quality of being born in the formless realm, and so forth. The so forth is not elaborated here or in the other commentaries. This line is taken out of the commentary by Yashomitra. So here it is, and we have the likeness and the life force are supporting the life here, the being in the formless realm in the formless realm. Why don't they do the same thing here? And so the reason is, so as it says here, the rhetorical question, well then, why do likeness and life force not support life in the realms of desire and form as well, you ask? This is because in those realms one is not free of the conception of form, and because the life force and so forth are weak in comparison. So we have an idea when we're in the formless realm, in the desire and the form realms, we have an idea, this is my body. There's a form, this is a body, you have attachment to the body still. And that is very strong. The life force is weak in comparison. The life force and the likeness and so forth are weak. So because the attachment to the body is strong, it's the body that then primarily will support the continuation of the consciousness and the desire in the form realms. The formless realm also arises from a particular absorption that has no conception of form. So the life force and so forth, propelled by previous karma, are strong. So the life force and the likeness in the formless realm are produced by the mind. You've got the mind of meditation. It produces the life force, and because that meditation is a very, very strong meditation, then the life force and the life force and likeness that it propels, and when you're reborn in the formless realm, are also, as a result, very strong. Stronger than they would be in the form or desire realms. So in this way, we have the mind is supported by the life force and the likeness. The likeness and the life force are kind of supported by the mind that propelled them. So it's like it's all working together. Basically what it's saying. It's basically saying that there's a certain interplay between the mind and the two qualities of life force and likeness. So that's what keeps you going in the formless realm. So that is classifying the wanderers in three realms: the form realm, the formless realm, the desire realm, form, and formless realm. And the distinctions, the important thing about here, at this point in the auto commentary, there's a long digression about just basically talking about the natures of the three realms. So when we're talking about the natures of the three realms, the first thing we have to think about is what is it that keeps you in the three realms? So the three realms, the first thing, as we've said a couple times, it's basically your attachment, the particular type of attachment. If you have the attachment of the desire realm, that is primarily to food and sexual pleasure and such sensory pleasures. Basically, I was thinking about it, you could say hedonist. If you're a hedonist, you're in the desire realm. And we're all, to a certain extent, hedonists, even if we might want to think that we're not. We're still all attached to food and various other pleasures, right? And in the form realm, you've got a subtler level of attachment. Nonetheless, you still have attachment. You've got a particular type of attachment. And then in the formless realm, you have an even subtler level of attachment, but you do still have attachment. So it's that level of attachment that classifies you in the different realms. So that's the first thing. It's basically, what are you attached to? So the question of what we're attached to becomes clearer when we talk about it later in the 6th chapter. So we won't go into that too much now, but basically you can think that that each of the different levels has its own particular affliction. So you've got the level of desire realm, you've got the 4 dhyanas, so you have 4 levels in the form realm, you've got the 4 formless realms. So you've got 9 different levels of attachments. Okay? So basically 9 levels of attachment means that you've got 9 different types of attachment. 1 keeps you in desire, 4 keep you in form, 4 keep you in formless realm. Okay. Then the other question is there only one? And the answer is that there's not. Now, here we will be flat earthers for a bit because we're talking about the Abhidharma. It says that when you go to the end of the desire realm, in the east, there's another desire realm. And there's another desire realm beyond that, and beyond that, and beyond that. Then when you get to the end of the desire realm in the south, there's another desire realm, and another desire realm beyond that, and beyond that. Same in the west and in the north. So basically, whatever direction you go, there are all these desire realms and all these other universes. You get to the end of one universe and you get to the next, basically, is what it's saying. And for each desire realm, then there are all the levels of form in those different realms. There's another, at the beginning of the 4th chapter, talks about it. You shouldn't think that they all look the same as our realm. They all take their own particular form because of the karma of the sentient beings in those realms. But in general, there are desire realms in all directions. Some sutras say that there are also, when you go up, you get above the level of below none, and there's a desire realm on top of that. But some people say, no, but then it wouldn't be below none, there's something above it. So this is something that is difficult for us ordinary sentient beings to be. But at any rate, there's infinite desire realms. But the main point is that when you have what keeps us in the desire realm is that particular type of attachment. When you are free of the attachment for the desire realm, you are freed of the attachment not just for one desire realm, but for all desire realms. And same with the form realms and the formless realms. Okay? So that's classifying the sentient beings in 3. So next we get to classifying wanderers in 5. So we've got the 3, and we've talked about wanderers in 5, so we'll a little bit already because it's kind of all mixed up. So the names, the wanderers and so forth, show 5 wanderers. So the actual here, when you talk about classifying wanderers in 5, there are 3 topics: the actual, the particulars, the elements, and the elaboration on these points. So actual here. So the actual means, it says, basically saying there are 5 different types of wanderers. The names, the hells and so forth, show 5 wanderers. So when we talk about the names, we've got hell, hungry ghost, animal, human, and gods. That gives us 5 wanderers, and they're indicated by their names. Saying the names in the 3 realms, the helms and so forth, animals, hungry ghosts, humans, and gods, shows 5 types of wanderers. This includes all sentient beings of the previous state. Okay. Previous state is talked about in a few pages. Previous state means before you die. So basically, from the moment of birth until the moment of death is called the previous state. It's called previous because it's prior to death. So everyone who's in the previous state, in other words, everyone who has taken rebirth, is a wanderer. But these do not include bardo beings. So these include all beings of the previous state. So now we have the discussion of, well, there are all sorts of beings, so the names aren't necessarily told. We've got, as it says, the levels, and so this means the Sangha text says the demigods are lesser gods. Others explain them as hungry ghosts. So when you talk about 6 classes of beings, we have gods and demigods. When you talk about 5, then the demigods are either put among the gods or they're put among the hungry ghosts, one or the other. Okay? Gandharvas are gods. The Yaksha demons are probably gods, but they are also explained as hungry ghosts. Nagasartans, Kinnaras, Garudas are animals. Kumbhandas, ghouls, banshees, and other demons are mostly hungry ghosts. So there are all sorts of different types of spirits in the world, and in Sanskrit and in Tibetan they have their own Kinnaras, Garudas, and so forth, and Kumbhandas. Ghouls and banshees are English words, of course, but they're basically all hungry ghosts. Okay? So now we have to wonder, well, what about the particulars of the elements? And we're talking about the elements. We're not talking about earth, water, fire. We're not talking about the periodic table. What we're talking about are the 18 elements. The characteristics, basically, are there. And in general, what it means, in specific, what it means is talking about, are they neutral, are they virtuous, are they unvirtuous, and so forth. So here it says, particulars of the elements. They're unafflicted and neutral. Sentient beings are called, but not those in the wand between state. So they're unafflicted and neutral. This means that sentient beings, you can have virtuous, unvirtuous, and neutral. You've got 3 possibilities when you're talking about it in this level. So of these 3, they're not virtuous, they're not inherently virtuous. Sentient beings can do virtuous things, but they're not inherently virtuous because there are some beings who have, as we say as it's described in the Abhidharma, who have severed the roots of virtue, who have a really severe wrong views, and in this lifetime they just no way for them to actually do virtue because they're wholly bad in this lifetime. Now that's not their actual nature, but it's just the current state that they're in. Severed the roots of virtue. Then you have beings who, so then the question, are beings unvirtuous, non-virtuous? No, they're not non-virtuous because any sentient being can do a good thing. People who've severed the roots of virtue can realize the error of their ways and then start practicing virtue. It's not a permanent state. And so then the other thing is that they're either non-virtue, or they could be if they're neither virtue nor non-virtue, then they're neutral. So we'd say that sentient beings are neutral. They're unafflicted neutral. They're called unafflicted because they don't necessarily always have afflictions. But there are, so they're unafflicted neutral. They're unobscured neutral. So they're not, so among the different types of quality, they're neutral. So that means basically what we're saying here is that any sentient being you can either do good or you can do bad. You can have good thoughts or you can have bad thoughts. But the nature is that you can go either way, so it's classified as neutral and unafflicted. If it were not so, and they were either afflicted or virtuous, the different beings would become mixed up, and those who had severed the roots of virtue and nobles would not be included among wanderers. So if you would say that someone who, if it weren't that case, then like people who develops really strong afflictions could all of a sudden turn into hell beings in the middle of one lifetime, but it doesn't happen like that. So it's not that they're particularly one or the other. Otherwise, the classifications would get all mixed up. Everyone stays in the same class for the whole life. And those who are seven and noble beings would not be included among wanderers because they're wholly virtuous, or because like a noble being is just wholly virtue, or unobscured neutral when they're like asleep. Someone who's severed the roots of virtue is never virtuous until they get the wrong thought. Until they come back to their senses, so to speak. So if they're one or the other, if you said that sentient beings were unvirtuous, then noble beings would not be sentient beings, or wanderers, I should say. Here the term is wanderer. And if they were virtuous, then beings who severed the roots of virtue would not be wanderers. So it can't be either that; they're neutral. As the environment of the world is not a wanderer, only sentient beings are called wanderers, but those in the between state are not. Okay, so we here in the Great Exposition tradition, we accept that there is a between state, or bardo, the period between death and birth. And so, but the beings in the between state are not called wanderers. Now, the English word that's fairly commonly used, it's not universal, but it's commonly used as wanderer. A more literal translation of the Sanskrit word is gati, and the Tibetan word is drowa. So that means the goer, the person who's going. It can also refer to the place that you've gone to. Sometimes the different classes of samsara are called the gati, the destination, so to speak. But here, we're talking about it as the sentient being. So they're called that because they've gone someplace. A human being has gone to the human realm. They're wandering in the human realm. They've gone there. So they're called the goer for that realm. Someone in the between state hasn't got anywhere yet. They've left one, they haven't got to the other one. Therefore, it didn't make sense in Sanskrit to call them gati. And we are left with a problem in English that if we translate gati or drowa as goer in English, it just sounds terrible. If we translate it as wanderer, it sounds like it should include the bardo beings. But when you're talking about it in terms of the Sanskrit word, it just didn't make sense to the Sanskrit people to call a being in the between state by that name. That's all it's saying. Okay? From the Pratyapti Shastra, the 4 modes of birth include the 5 wanderers, but the 5 wanderers do not include the 4 modes of birth. What is not included? The between state. The between state is the miraculous birth. It's not the final birth. It's like you miraculously appear in the between state. So it's included among the 4 modes of birth, but it's not included among the 5 wanderers. Therefore, the Great Exposition proposes that beings are unobscured neutral only because they are separate from the cause that established them, karmic becoming. So you're propelled by your karma. And here what this is referring to in very short is a quote that's given in the auto commentary of Shariputra talking to the monks. Basically, what Shariputra says is, well, what is a hell being? My friends, a hell being is someone who, because of the faults in their mind and because of the afflictions in their mind, performs bad actions. And because of that, their form, feeling, conception, formation, and consciousness are born in hell. So there is nothing to a hell being other than that form, feeling, conception, or consciousness. So those are the 5 aggregates that are reborn in hells. There's no other hell being. There's nothing else there. Those are born because of full ripening. And when they're produced because of full ripening, as we discussed in the 2nd chapter, those of you who were with our class last year, anything that is produced by full ripening is by its nature neutral. An important point that I'll keep coming back to this year. If something is the full ripening of karma is neutral. So when you are born, when you first enter the womb and you have the sperm and the ovum and your consciousness coming together, at that moment, the form, feeling, conception, formation, and consciousness are all neutral. Right? It's the same when a being is born in hell or when they're born as a hungry ghost or animal or a god. That is neutral. So therefore, the body, the being, is the result of full ripening, and therefore it is neutral. So now we've got a little bit of elaboration. I want to go a little bit further, otherwise I'm not going to finish by the end of June, having only gone through 3 pages so far. So we're going to go one more page today. The 7 places of consciousness. Fortunately, this one's a little bit easier. So when we're thinking about it, places of consciousness, what places of consciousness means are places that support, that are like nourishing, good for consciousness, that support consciousness, where consciousness can easily stay. So these 7 places of consciousness, there are 2 points here. There's the actual and what is not that. So this is on the top of page 220. The actual is, the text reads, a different body and conception, a different body, same conception. Reverse, same body and conception. And the 3 places without form are the 7 places of consciousness. Oh, this is another one of those lines that Vasubandhu is giving us that the first time you read it is just incomprehensible. So the first place of consciousness is a place where you have a different body and a different conceptions. Your ideas are different, your bodies are different. The second place of consciousness is where the bodies are different, but everyone has the same thought, the same conception. The third place of consciousness is the opposite. Everyone has different conceptions, but they have the same body. And then there's the one where the level where they have the same body and the same conceptions. Then you've got the 3 without form. Or perhaps a better translation would be 3 of the places without form. So 3 of the formless realms. These are the 7 places of consciousness. So to explain this, the commentary reads, in these 3 realms of 5 wanders, a desire, form, and formless, the 5 wanders, hell's, humans, animals, hell's, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, and gods. There are 7 places of consciousness are explained. They are taught in the sutras. The gods and humans of desire, and those who rise in the first dhyana and later epochs, have a different body and conception. So for humans, it's easy for us to see. It's also easy to see for the gods. When you have humans all have different types of body. We're all born in the realm of Jambudvipa, so we're pretty much the same. If we were born in the eastern continent of superior body, we'd have different shaped faces. Your face is kind of the same shape of your continent. So our faces are kind of the shape of the continent of Jambudvipa. And if you're born in Unpleasant Sound, then you must have kind of a square face. So you have different types of bodies, but even we can see that within our realm. We all have, if we look at it in kind of the multicultural current way, we'd say, oh yes, there are some people who have different color skins, some are tall, some are short, different bodies. We have different ideas. It's obvious. We have different ideas. Don't need to go into that one. But what we do need to explain is those who rise in the first dhyana and later epochs. So that one's going to be easier to understand later. So then the second place of consciousness is great Brahma and the assembly of gods around him have different robes, colors, and shapes, so they have different body, but they all conceive that great Brahma created me, and Brahma also conceives, I have created those beings, so they have the same conception. So when the universe forms, beings inhabit the realm starting from the top down, starting from the 4th dhyana down to the 3rd, 2nd, 1st. And so when they get to the 1st dhyana, the first one to be born there is great Brahma, who's born in, of course, the realm of great Brahma. He's the first one there. And then all these other gods appear around him, and great Brahma thinks to himself, I am great Brahma, and I have created these beings, because they just appeared. So he must have created them. And these other beings appear, and they don't know why, and they see great Brahma, and they think, oh, he must have created us. Actually, they've all just been reborn there by their karma. But Brahma thinks he's created the gods. They think they've created them, so they have the same conception. So that's at the very beginning of an eon. Then there are later there are other beings who are born in that first jhana, in the 3 levels of the first jhana, and they don't have the idea that they were created by Brahma. They think, okay, Brahma was here, he made them first, but I was born here later by my karma. Okay, so that's what it talks about, those who arise in the first jhana in later epochs in the previous sentence. Does that make sense? They have a different idea. But the ones who appeared at the beginning of the first epoch, they have different color robes, purple, green, red, whatever. They have different bodies, but they all have the same idea. Then in the second dhyana, it's in the reverse of the preceding. The gods of the second dhyana have bodies that are same in that their nature is light. If you remember, this is the level of lesser light, immeasurable light, and radiant light. But their conception is sometimes pleasure and sometimes equanimity, so their conceptions arise differently. So this is one way of explaining it. On the level of the second dhyana, the type of pleasure is what we call mental pleasure, and it's not stable. Comes and goes. So for that reason, sometimes they have a conception of pleasure and sometimes they don't. Another way that this is explained in the auto commentary is that at the end of an eon, when the world up through and including the first jhana is destroyed by fire, the gods on the second jhana look down and they're seeing, wait a minute, the earth, the whole world is being the earth, Mount Meru, and all the realms, all the god realms, up through the first, even Brahma's realm is being destroyed by fire. And some of them will say, oh no, we better do something, it's going to get to us. And then there are some gods who said, look, we've been through this before, relax, nothing wrong, it's only going to affect the beings in the first jhana and below, you don't have to worry about fire. Okay, so then they're relaxed, and there are those who are not relaxed. And so that's the different conceptions. The gods of the third dhyana are the same in having a body that is light by nature in the conception of pleasure, because the pleasure of this level is stable. So you all might remember from last year when we talked about the different faculties of pleasure. There's pleasure and mental pleasure. And then there is that funny pleasure on the level of the third dhyana, which we called cognitive pleasure. Right? So those 3 types of this. And that actually is a type of the first type of pleasure. So you have 2 pleasures, but they're kind of like 3. So at any rate, they have a stable type of pleasure, so they have the same conceptions. So these 4 places, so these are the 3, we've got, so these 4 places to form. So you have the desire realm, the humans and gods of the desire realm, that's one place. The first 3 levels of dhyana, those are 4 places for consciousness. These 4 places that have form, and the 3 places without form, and 3 of the places without form to retranslate of infinite space, infinite consciousness, and nothingness are the 7 places of consciousness. So that's the 7. We've got desire realm, humans and gods, first, second, and third dhyanas, 3 of the formless realms, so that makes 7. Okay? These 7 places are taught in the sutras. They are called places of consciousness because in them the manner of craving supports and develops the consciousness. So you have a particular type of attachment that feeds or nourishes or benefits the consciousness. So then there's the question of what is not that. The others have that which destroys it. So the others that were not mentioned, so this means the 3 lower realms, the 4th dhyana, and the peak of existence are not places of consciousness because the lower realms have suffering. The 4th dhyana has both the causal and resultant conception-free absorption, and on the peak there is the absorption of cessation. So they have that which destroys it, consciousness. So when we talk about the 3 lower realms, you've got hells, hungry ghosts, and animals. And in these 3, you're pretty much experiencing constant suffering of different levels, different extremities, but it's pretty much constant suffering. You all might be thinking about playful otters, but that's really not the bulk of the beings in the animal realm. They're really experiencing a lot of suffering because they have so much suffering. It's not conducive to consciousness. It harms the consciousness. On the level of the 4th consciousness, of the 4th jhana, you have conception-free absorption. So the conception-free absorption is a very powerful non-Buddhist absorption where the conception in the mind ceases entirely. There's absolutely no movement of conception. This is the third of the four dhyanas. And because there's no conception, then the consciousness can't really operate. So when you enter the conception-free absorption, conception ceases, and you can stay in this absorption for a very long time. Except, what's the good of staying in it for a very long time? Because you are not even aware that you were in the absorption. It just goes by in a moment. You may have been in it for eons, but it goes by in a moment. So this is on the level of the fourth dhyana. So this type of absorption does not benefit consciousness, and so for that reason, that fourth dhyana is not considered a place for consciousness. And on the peak, so the peak means the fourth level of the formless realm, neither conception nor non-conception, is also called the peak of existence, or peak for short. So that has the absorption of cessation. So the absorption of cessation is a type of absorption that arhats are able to enter. Once they have given up all attachment to all the realms, they can enter this absorption of cessation. And in the absorption of cessation, all mind and mental factors cease. Again, similar to the conception-free absorption, but here it's a noble absorption. So that doesn't support consciousness. So that is also not a place of consciousness. There's just two more short sections that I'm going to go through today, because it's kind of related. And then so those are the 7 places of consciousness. Then we have the 9 places for beings, and this has 2 points: the actual and what is not that. So the actual reads, with beings on peak and concept free, they're said to be 9 places for beings. So you take those 7 we just described: human and desire realm gods, 3 levels of form, 3 levels of formless, and you add beings on peak, that means the 4th level of formless, and concept free, that means includes the 4th dhyana. So this basically means these 9 levels. This includes the 9 places for beings. So as it says here, along with the beings on the peak of existence and conception free, these 7 places of consciousness are said to be the 9 places for beings. The reason why they're called this is because sentient beings always remain there with pleasure. Right? So it's pleasurable to be in the human realm, even more pleasurable to be in the various levels of the God realms, essentially. So they're places for 9. These are the 9 places for beings. What is not that? Since one remains against one's wishes, the others are not. Since their nature is that one remains in them against one's wishes, one is forced to stay by the demons of karma. The other 3 lower realms, the others refers to the 3 lower realms: hells, hungry ghosts, and animals. They're not places for beings. They are, for example, like prisons. So being caught in the hells and the hungry ghosts and the animals is the same as being trapped in prison. There's no way out except being reborn in a higher realm. So you're kept there by the demons of karma. So those are the 9 places for beings. And I think that is enough for this afternoon. So now let us please dedicate the merit of listening to and contemplating the Dharma this afternoon, and please dedicate it for the benefit of all sentient beings, so that in the short term they may be free of all, my habit is to say plague, famine, and war, but we should say pandemic, famine, and war, and all other sufferings temporarily, and that they achieve ultimate happiness. Osanam de tam che se pani topne nye pedranam pam chene kegana che barlav trobai Sibe tole drowa sho. Thank you.